mark check, total mark sheets check. Okay, so these are the variables that we will be using to monitor the number of mark sheets under sa first division and the total of mark sheets na atuan ng nachikan. Okay? So, mo na to ang gigamit for initialization set. And then, since this function, okay, or the process involves repetitive task, okay, gagamit og while. Okay? So, mo ni atong iteration na part. So, all those statements nga ato ang gibutang in between sa while ug end while, those are the portion that needs to be repeated. Okay? So, nagbutang ta diri og condition. After sa while, unsa may condition. Okay? While the total mark sheets check is less than 50, okay, we perform all these statements that are inside the end while statement. Okay? So, unsa may gibuhat inside this while statement? So, it involves you reading the mark sheets and then checking if the mark sheet ba is equal to the first division. If it is equal to the first division, unsay mahitabo? Okay? You simply increment the variable total first division. Okay? So that is basically mura ra kag nagingon og total first division is equal to total first division plus 1. Okay? So gi-increment ra nimo ang iyang value by 1. Okay? However, if this mark sheet is not equal to the first division or didn't came from the first division, then ang imong increment is si total mark sheet check. Okay? So you keep on doing this until maabot ang imuhang total mark sheet check to 50. Okay? So kung maabot na siya 50, this will render the statement false kay di naman siya less than 50, equal to 50 or greater than 50 naman. So your iteration ends and then you are now able to print kung pila to imuhang naihap nga coming from the total first division. Okay? So if we look at the pseudocode guys, okay na ba siya? What do you think? Or do we need to further refine the pseudocode? Namoy nakitaan nga medyo anomalous sa tuang pseudocode. Okay. Hello, people? Or is it crystal clear? Okay? Now, para ato ang matrace kung sakto ba jud siya, let's lower down the number of mark sheets. So instead of 50, let's put it 5. Okay? So let's try to trace. So let's say on the 5 mark sheets that you have, okay? Sa 5, let's say ang naay label nga first division is kani o kani. Okay? So let's say 5 ang ato ang buhaton. Okay? Or 5 ka mark sheet ato ang checkan out of 50. Okay? So we modify lang the condition to 5 na lang instead of 50. Okay? So if we run your pseudocode, again, nag-start at 0 for the total first division, the total mark sheet check is also 0. Then we read the mark check. Okay. So the mark sheet is read. If the mark sheet is total to first division, is it equal? No. Wala man siya first division. So you go asa man tamog to. Wala na'y condition, di ba? If naman siya. Okay? Wa man tay else. So what happens here? Again, ato ang gi-increment si total mark sheet check. So si total mark sheet check is now equal to 1 from 0. So balik na punta. Read na pud na to ang mark sheet, then you check again if the first or the mark sheet ba is equal to the first division. If it is equal, yes, you increment this. So this now becomes 1. Then after this condition, what do? We increment again the total mark sheet check. So from 1, mahimo din siyang 2. And then balik na pod. Then you check again. So when we check unsay nahitabo, first division man gihapon na siya. So this now becomes 2. Kaya to ang mag-increment. And then you increment again the total mark sheet check. Okay? So until maabot ka og 4. Okay? So manong upat ra man ang matchikan. So actually, gi-appeal man nato diri guys ang value nga 0. Okay? So we were actually counting from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So the moment nga maabot na tag 4, okay, pasabutan na, we have actually already checked 5 kabuok mark sheets. Okay? So ayaw kay mo kalipat ana dapita. Kay we started here checking the mark sheets at a value of 0. So every time natin machikan, we increase the value by 1. Okay? So mo nang sa ato ang condition diri guys is less than 5. Kay ang counting nato gi-appeal man nato ang 0. So that means kung 4 kataman, there's actually 5 mark sheets that are being checked. Okay? So more na siya guys ang logic. Okay? Sa pseudocodes. And of course, after reaching the value, okay, so take note, awa ha, kung let's say ang total mark sheet check dere is 4 na. Okay? Or rather, 4 na siya, igabot dire sa increment, mahimo na siyang 5. Diba? Igbalik niya dire, i-check niya sa condition, 5 is less than 5. Maunsa naman na siya, it becomes false. So that means you exit the loop. After exiting the loop, you can now print the total first division, which is 2 ang value. Okay? So, mo na siya guys. Ang logic sa ato ang pseudocode. Okay? So, moving forward, we also have the flowchart. Okay? So, we'll have more example of pseudocodes guys. Tagsa-tagsaon niya na to siya. Okay? So, i-create na to pseudocode. Let's create that later side by side with flowchart. So, let us first identify what are the symbols. So, I think majority of you got this correctly during the quiz. So we have your oblong as your terminal, which is used to designate the start and stop, okay, terminal for each of your program. And this can also be used later when we create our gitawag na tog subroutine or kanang function. Okay? So sa ubos, the rectangle, you have there the process. Okay? So that's where we typically make use of the compute keyword. Okay? So nadira ang anything that needs to be done. Okay? Like for example, if you're doing computations, okay, multiplications, divisions, okay, anha natin butang. So any process or procedures that needs to be done. Okay? So next we have there the parallelogram, okay, which is used to identify the input side and the output side of your flowchart. Okay? Now how will we identify if it's an input or output? Okay? We can also make use that keywords under sa pseudocode. Okay? So you could probably put there also the word read if it's gonna be used as an input, or you could use print if it's gonna be used as an output. Okay? So, pwede nimo labelan nga na ang ato ang parallelogram. And of course, the decision. Okay? So, unsa maning decision? So, we use that to represent operation in which there are two possible selections. Okay? Or you have two possible branches. Okay? So, since you're talking about selection, that selection is basically a question that is answerable with either a yes or a no, o pwede po true or false. Okay? So, mo na ang gigamit nato for the decision part. Okay? Then we also have there another block, okay, which is somewhat similar to the rectangular block that we have, the process, but dire gilibilan siya specifically as a function or subroutine. Okay? So later on sa ato ang topic niya in programming, okay, ato ara niya nang maagian guys ang function. So whenever makaagitaan ng function, that's basically that part of your code that can be reused over and over. Okay? So instead of sige kag buhat ana nga flowchart sa imong code, pwede na nimo ihimo nga separate code. If there is parts sa imong flowchart that would be reusing, okay, that procedure nga ihang gi-perform. Okay? Next, we also have the on-page connector. Okay? So, gamit kini on-page connector sa una wherein ang answer nato na as papel kay usahay magkulang ang papel. Since digital naman taron, I think na atay unlimited size of paper. So, masudra siguro ng flowchart ninyo. Okay? So, again, gitawag siyang on-page connector because when you create your flowchart, let's say for example, in a single piece of paper, kung medyo taas na gani kaayo ang connection from one point to another point and it would cause the flow to have this so-called cross, okay, na crossover, ang buhaton ninyo ana, pwede na nimo i-cut off niya, magbutang ka og page connector, indicating sumpay ra ni siya nga part padong sa pikas nga part. Okay? So again, as of now, murag di pa kay na nato siya magamit. Okay? So naput tay off page connector, simply if let's say for example, dili masud sa usa ka papel, ipadayon nimo sa another paper, you use this one. Okay? So again, nara ni label ibutang ninyo, let's say letter baron ang gamiton. For example, kani on page. Okay? Coming from a logic. So diri pud sa pikas, mag-create pud kag another on-page connector indicating nga kani nga point is actually connected diri nga part sa imong flowchart. Kani pud siya sa off-page connector, again, for us to be able to identify if ang pangitaon ba nato nga connection diri nga wa nimo matiwas is on the same page or to another page. So it will be easily distinguishable looking at the symbol. Kung ingani gani, the connection belongs to the same page. Kung kani gani, expected it is found on another page. And of course, ang ato ang flow line. Okay? So this will indicate the direction of the flow of control. Okay? So initially, gamit pud kay na siya sa sequential. Okay? Nga structure. Okay? Kaysa sequential structure, top to bottom raman, left to right, maura mo dyan na ihang flow. Okay? But when you talk about selection and iteration, okay, that is also where it is mostly useful para makabauta who comes first and who comes next. Okay, so here are just some of the common operators that you can use when doing flowcharting. So especially when you are performing process, okay, that involves the typical arithmetic operators, okay? napod tayo relational operators. Okay? So hopefully we are familiar with that one. Unsay kalahian anang greater than or less than, o greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. Okay? These operators are actually the same operators that you will be using later. Ikabot ninyo og programming, guys. Okay? So, hello? You still there?
Yes, sir. Napa, sir.
Okay.
Napa, sir. Napa, sir.
So, how about logical operators? Are you familiar with logical operators? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Mm.
Yes, sir.
Napa, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, whenever maghisgot og AND operation, guys, unsa may musud sa inyong hunahunaan ng AND? Okay? What is AND operation? Okay? What is that so-called OR operation? O unsa man ang NOT? Okay? So, one example, okay, of using AND operator in a statement. Okay? So, when you say sa may mas practical nga example ani nga makarelate mo. Let's say I will go to school only when my mama gives me baon and I am fully vaccinated. Okay? So, when you say and, dira guys, okay, that means mandatory jud nga hatagan jud kag baon ni mama ug dapat fully vaccinated na ka. So, if one of those conditions are not met, like for example, ang pinaka-importante, wa ka hatagig baon ni mama, so di ka muskwila. Okay? So, mo na siya when you say and. Okay? So, that means two operands must be true. Okay? Mas importante daw ko na ang vaccine matod pang sumalinog. Okay? So, mo na siya guys when you say and. Okay? Now, how about or? Be? Who could give me an example of or? Na statement, example. Okay? How can we use the or logical operator? So, when you say or, di ba, na kay option, bisag asa sa usa. Okay? So, unsa may nindot nga example when you use or? Okay? Mo na ra pod hatagan kag baon ni mama if dagko imuhang grado or magsigi kag limpyo sa balay. Okay? So, pasabot ana any of the two condition, kung maglisod man jud kayo mukuha dako nga grado daw, so maglimpyo na lang kag balay. Or dako man kay among balay kapoy kig limpyo, malinguha na lang kog tuon para dako ko grado. Okay? So either of the two, okay? Pwede ka mahatagag baon sa imong mama if one of those conditions are met. Okay? So mao na ang or. Okay? Ug not, unsa maning not na operator? So not operator is basically murag na inverse. Okay? So ingon ni Sumalinog, mukaon kog pamahaw kung humba ang sudan or ikaw. Char, hugot pa. Okay? Nindot. Nindot sad ni kanibal man din ni si Sumalinog. Okay? So let's say not. Saan na ito paggamit si not? Okay? Gwapo si Sumalinog. Not. Okay?
Maninood man sila.
Pwede ito na ito gamiton, di ba? Bali ba? Bali. Mo na si not, guys. Okay? So actually, kanang logical operators, guys, those are actually the basis of how computer works. Okay, that is how computers makes decision using the and the or logic. Okay, now yun sa muna pag-decide sa computer ka ng and nga operation. Okay, now actually it is a concept that is something not new to you guys. Okay, I think um, you have already had an experience with the and or operation. Okay? So, actually before you ambot lang sa physics man ninyo, naba mo ikuan basic electricity sa physics nga topic.
Faraday, sir.
Hmm?
Faraday's.
Faraday's.
So,
Okay? So, when you were having your physics before, guys, what are the two types of electrical circuits?
active current o direct current, sir. Ay, alternating current.
Circuits man, circuits.
Ay, circuit. Ay.
Oh,
Parallel
Parallel
and
and
Parallel.
series.
Parallel og
Series and
series, sir.
parallel.
okay. Parallel and series. So, familiar ba mo ani nga kon symbol?
sa switch.
Okay, so this is a push button. Okay. So, simple electrical circuit. Okay. So, these are your so-called push buttons. Okay, so kanang naay X mark dira, those are your lamps. So let's say I have two push button, I name it A and B. Okay? So asa diri si series? Okay,
Ano
so,
ba ko, sir?
okay, ang nasa ibabaw may series ug ang nasa ubos mao na ang parallel. Okay? Now, if you look at that connection, guys, where do you think is synonymous with the and condition?
First, sir.
Okay.
Series, sir.
So, ang series, di ba? Kaya nga naman, para mo on ang suga, dapat si A o si B naka-on.
On.
Okay? So, mo nang and siya nga condition. Kay mandatory man that both operands A and B must be on. Okay? So, di ba, nakahisugot na before with the computer system, they work using binary numbers 1 and 0. 1 is essentially equivalent to true, 0 is false, or it could also be 1 is on and 0 is off. Okay? Now, if you look at the parallel circuit, guys, okay, that is synonymous with the what operation?
Or.
Or. Okay, nga naman, any one of the switches could cause the output of X2 to turn on. Okay, just like that of your or nga logic. Okay? Unya, how about NOT? How is NOT represented in electrical circuits? Okay? Kaya kung na ay logical operator NOT, that means na po na siya equivalent na hardware implementation. Okay? Now for the NOT, this is how it is implemented. Okay? So, as you can see here, these push buttons are activated the moment you apply pressure on top. It will push your button to make contacts here. Okay, thus turning the circuit on. This one is a so-called normally closed push button. That means, wala pa na nimo ma-press, nag-make na siya connection sa switch, thereby mo turn on ang imuhang suga. But the moment you apply pressure here, the moment you activate your push button, the circuit turns off. So, di ba? Baliktad ang iyahang gibuhat. Okay? So, mao na siya, guys. Okay? Ang not na operation. Hello, guys?
Yes, sir.
Nasabtan ra ang and, or, og ang not.
Yes,
Okay?
sir.
Yes, sir.
So, ambot lang ka kung naabot na ba mo ani sa AutoCAD ninyo. Okay? So, when you use the and operation, okay, it's like performing intersection. Okay? And when you use or, it is basically performing union. Okay? Familiar mo na nga operator, guys, sa AutoCAD? Kanang symbol nga ni na kay duha ka circle, na kay another circle. If you perform intersection, okay, ang mabilin kaning naa diri, which is common to both this and this. Okay? O kanang union, again, given the two circle, if you use, i-combine na niya ang duha ka object. Okay? Okay. Wala pa mo tudlo sa AutoCAD. Wala mo yung nakatunan sa YouTube.
Self-study namin, sir.
Self-study. O, di ba naman may kuhan diri? Naman tinagtudlo ninyo diri? Kinsa ganito inyong kauban? Nahanas na kay AutoCAD.
Pro kayo.
Sila kayo, sir. Sila kayo.
Si Ken.
Si Ken.
Si Ken. Okay, so problema ang AutoCAD gigamit 2019 pero tingbog ata. Okay? So, malagi nito to datog na alternative na may mga free unta nga version na ning CAD. Wa man gipagamit. Okay? So anyway, kana guys, sa AutoCAD niyo ba mag klase mo sagol gyapon sa night?
Oo, sir. Sagaran.
Kasagaran jud. Ikapila na ninyo nga meeting gani sa AutoCAD?
Murag,
Tulo.
katulo na, sir.
Katulo.
Permi jud sagol, sir.
Nya sagol jud permi.
Yes, sir.
Sahay gani kung kasi sa night cap apilon man niya.
Oo, kung apit ato.
I-appeal ko.
Ni appeal. Pero sa inyong klase magsige og tunga.
Video
Or-
dyan, sir.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
magtuwa sir. Di man siya mutingog.
Di sa di mo mangutan na.
Ma-reply na si sir
chatbox,
sa chat box.
Ah. Yeah, dili live ang sound. Okay. Pero at least ni-reply siya, no?
Ang kami kadingog siyang tingog.
Oh, request mo, sir.
Voice reveal.
Ganahan
Voice
yung luminaw si mong tingog, sir.
Is rebel, sir.
Oh, ing na lang, giubo ka, sir. Okay, bisag sakit yung tutunan ni sir. Sige na lang. So anyway, mo na siya, guys. Those are the common operators nga inyong gamiton niya. So I think, are you familiar with the term unary o binary operators? Okay, unsa man ang moingon tag unary operator ug unsa man ang binary operator. Okay? Unary, di ba, usa. When you say binary,
Duha.
duha. Okay? So, kung magtan-aw ta dire, okay, not is an example of a unary operator. Okay? Because it only utilizes one operand. Unlike or and and, required jud siya og duha. So when you say operand, di ba, mo nang imuhang ibutang sa left side o sa right side, which is similar to your relational operator. When you use a relational operator, you always need two operands. Okay? So mao na siya, guys. Okay, common operators nga inyo niyang gamiton in flowcharting. Okay? So let's say guidelines when creating flowcharts. Okay? So a chart, the chart, okay, chart is the main logic, then incorporates your detail. Okay? So it's basically murag from generic to specific. Okay? So do not chart everything in chart. A consistent level of detail must be maintained. Okay, so in this example niya later, we will be applying kaning gitawag niya nga function. Okay, there are cases manggod wherein your flowchart becomes so big kay naay part sa code nimo nga murag repetitive nga pwede ra nimo himuan niya og function. Okay? So next, names used should be problem specific. Okay? So unsa may pasabot-an ng should be problem specific. So when you say problem specific, that means the variables or the names that you will be using should be self-documenting. Okay, let's say for example, maghisgot og math. Diba? Dira ta moingon og let's say doing subtraction. Okay, dira ta moingon og input A, input B. Okay? If the operation that you will be performing is subtraction, then you'll be more specific, okay, with the name of the operands. Like for example, moingon ka og minuend. Okay, interminuend, intersubtrahend. Okay? So something like that. Next, crossing of flow lines may be avoided. Okay? So unsa man ang flow lines? So katong gipakita nato ganina nga nay mga arrowheads. So as much as possible dapat walay mag crossing. So how do you avoid crossing? So you could make use of unsa tay tawag ani niya?
On-page connector.
On-page connector.
Connector.
Okay? So moabot ng panahon na igihimo nimo flowchart, di jud malikayan na kailangan man jud kumulabang sa pikas unsaon kani. So you can make use of on-page connector. Okay? So connectors may be leveled and construction should be from top to bottom and left to right. Okay? So at least it will be easier for others to read your flowchart. Okay? Kay nag-utilize man ta o ani nga klase nga guidelines that when you read a flowchart, it should be that you read it from top to bottom, then from left to right. Okay? Kay unsaon na lang nagbasa ka sa imuhang comics, nagtuo kag pang Marvel. So you are reading your comics starting from the left padung sa right side niya kato imong comics nga gibasa mangga di ay. So that means ang pag-abli sa page is from right padung sa left. Okay? So hibong lang ka, buhi pa ang karakter, namatay namang karakter niya, nabuhi. Okay? So baliktad day pagkabasa. Okay, so mana we take note of these guidelines when creating our flowchart. Okay? Now let's look on to the examples of this basic control structure. Okay, starting from the sequence or the sequential structure. Okay, so again, very straightforward ang process. Okay, process are executed one after the other. Okay, so typical dire makita nato nga natay terminal block. So essentially this is the top. So expected that should be the starting point of your flowchart. And this one on the rightmost side is the end of your program. So of course, essentially this one is where you read your data. This is where you perform your computation. And this is where you print, okay, your output as a result of those read data and the computation involved. Okay? So, very simple. Okay? Straightforward ra kayo. Okay? So, in this example, find the average mark secured by 4 students. So, how do we do this? Okay? So, first, we read all the marks. Pila ka bookmarks? Upat. Then, we compute for the total mark. Okay? Using the operation mark 1 plus mark 2 plus mark 3 plus mark 4 is equal to total. And then to compute for the average, you simply divide total by 4 and then you compute for the average. So again, it's very, very simple. Okay? So typically when you talk about sequential na structure, okay, it's basically applications ra jud ni siya guys sa mga stock knowledge ninyong nakatunan probably during algebra, trigo, okay? Apil lang sigara na sa calculus, okay? Maybe. Nag-calculus naman mo ron, no?
Oh, sir.
And how do you find it? Refreshing?
Madugo.
Madugo. Okay, so it's just like a review, di ba? Na naman may calculus pag senior high.
Dili
Senior
naman
high,
siya.
sir.
Kalisod
Ano,
din kami pag senior high.
pandemic.
Karon na ka, ha?
After pandemic.
Nabtag pandemic. Pasabot na guys, karon magkasayo na siya ang calculus for you because it is not the first time that um, you have met calculus. Okay, ikaduha naman na ninyong meeting with calculus. So it should be a breeze na. Okay, kay mahagbong man nag-recall na lang ang buhaton ninyo.
Ni-upgrade mo sa sila, sir.
Upgrade na sa do. Pero at least, di ba, it's not the first time. Kaysa ka ng first time yun mong naagian. Lingaw kayo, di ba? Okay, so anyway, mao na siya guys. One example for our sequential na structure. Okay, so here is another example. Okay, typically computation for the interest. Okay, so in the problem nalimot ko butag state nga apil na to ang name, okay, sa tag-iya aning account. Okay, so you read the name, the balance, and the rate. Okay, and then to compute for the interest, it's just as simple as multiplying the balance and the rate. Okay, so after you're done with the computation, you print the name, and then you're done. Okay. Okay. So, mo na siya guys for our computation of interest rate. Okay? So, something, again, gikan sa inyong stock knowledge guys, you can pull this out gikan sa inyong stock knowledge. Kay kani nga idea was already introduced to you as early as senior high, di ba? So, I think, high school na, namang gani mo ano, how to compute for interest rates. Naana ba? Or depende? Depende sa school. Naana. Sisiw na kayo ninyo guys. So sa programming, again, it's essentially, kung ano dyan siya guys, mahagbong na ni siya o in a way, application, implementation sa inyong mga nakatunan sa una. Okay? So moving forward, there are some exercises provided dira sa inyong notes that you might want to answer. So let's say kani daw, let's try to answer this one. Okay? Have you already installed whiteboard guys? Or kanang Jamboard for those who are using cell phones? Nakasuway na mauana, wala pa. Okay. So I have put there in the chat box a link for your Jamboard. Okay. So pwede ninyo ni-ansiran guys. Okay, sige daw. Let's look for a volunteer. Kinsay ato ang pansiron ani. Who would like to try? Nakagamit na ba mo aning Jamboard guys? Or first time ninyo? First time. Okay, so let me just run you on this guys. What is this so-called Jamboard? So think of Jamboard as your electronic blackboard na for example kailangan nato og naatay mag-board work ta. Okay, this board is common for all to use. Okay, So naamoy access ani tanan. So for example, kaning himo ni Kenneth Mahusay. Okay? So gisugdan niya o drawing. Okay? So you can
Sumana ako, sir.
so kinsa man din ni nag-drawing diri ron. Okay, papas man. Okay? So pwede mo maka-drawing diri guys. Okay? Pwede mo maka-shout out dira sa inyong mga crushes o mas una pa niyang acknowledge ang mga laki. Okay? Guys daw, all my girls. So you can actually also erase this. Okay? So if ever gani maglisod mo og suwat, you are using your finger lang or your mouse, you can actually use this text box here to add text. Okay? So sample text entry. Okay? So pwede na ninyo mabuhat diri guys. Okay? Entry. And you can also, of course, modify the color of your text. Okay? Sige, na siya. Sige. So, can we have someone to make the pseudocode for this exercise? And probably, while someone is making the pseudocode, pwede po ang uban maghimo sa flowchart. Okay? So, pwede na ninyo matabangan, guys. Sige, let's try to practice. Okay. So, for those who are using cell phones, I would suggest for you to make use of to install the application Jamboard. Okay? So, natay app ani kay maglisod ni siya i-open kung ana sa browser ninyo. Mas mayo mag-download mo atong Jamboard na app. Okay. And you can also use some of the existing shapes here. Okay. Unfortunately, walay parallelogram. Okay. O dili siya mas Q. Dili siya mas Q. So for the pseudocode, so no need to put the word start. Okay. So take note if there are, let's say for example, selections or iteration nga statement involved, okay, you observe proper tabbing. Okay? Para may bawa na to kung kinsay sunod sa decision or kinsay sunod sa iteration. Okay, so let's try to see. So read unsa man ni F and C. Okay, what do we need to read? Okay, so we only read F. Okay, maora may gipangayo, di ba? Nga may convert nimo into Celsius. Okay? So unsa man ni input C temp. Okay? So again, we have the read naman that will serve as your input. Okay? And then you do the calculation. Okay? So in terms na guys, wala na need to put a tab. Okay? Kay we only use tab if you're using selection or iteration. Okay? So same ra na sila og level. So say gi-compute na to ang ato ang Celsius using Fahrenheit na input. Okay? Then print C. Then stop. Okay? So take note, terminal block gyapon gamiton. Okay? So that guys is our Jamboard. Okay. Og nalingaw na sila sa Jamboard. Okay. So let's proceed to the next one. Okay. Og wa na, nalingaw na jud sila. So mo ni mga tawhan na ay kanang pag high school or pag senior high, kung wa si teacher gasige og atang sa blackboard. Okay. So sige, balik ta sa ato ang discussion. So next we have here the selection structure. Okay, so again sa selection structure, as you can see, naatay diamond, wherein dira sa diamond anha nimo ipangbutang ang imuhang conditions which are basically generated using your relational operator or logical operator. Okay? So, in this example, as you can see, there are two possible actions nga pwede nimo buhaton based sa decisions niya nga imuhang i-make. Okay? So, and those decisions could either be as a result of the conditions being true or being false. Okay. So, this is the typical structure nga ato ang i-follow, guys. So, if the condition is true, then you perform the one on sequence 1. Okay? Now, if you have an option to do another thing, if the condition is false, then you can put also your sequence. So, if you have nothing to do as an alternative for the true nga statement, pwede ra pud ka moingon ka og in if. Okay? So, pwede ra why else. Again, depende ra pud na siya sa conditions or scenario nga gihatag. Okay? So, in this example, as you can see, we are to identify if the person is short or tall. Okay? So, we have used there, guys. Okay? We have used there relational operator o nganong Mark 1 may gigamit. Kadot lang. Let me correct that first. Na Mark 1 man tayo. Okay. So, correcting lang the example we have there, read na to ang height. So, we then use a relational operator to compare height to the standards of what is considered as tall and what is considered as short. So, if your height is above 1.6 meters, then you are said to be tall. Otherwise, if your height is just 1.5 meters, then you are considered as short. Okay? So a very simple example of how decisions are made in flowchart. Okay? So sa may bantayan na nato when using selection, you identify the condition kung asa ang true. Okay. Kung asa ang true o kung asa ang false. Okay? So don't forget that, guys, when you are creating your flowchart. Dapat i-indicate yun nimo asa si true, asa si false. Okay? So here is another example, okay, that is used to identify if you are gonna pass or if you are gonna fail. Okay? So computing for the average of 4 subjects. Okay? So again, basa tag input, upat ka buok, M1, M2, M3, and M4. Okay? So diri gi-shortcut na lang nato, instead of read M1, read M2, read M3, read M4, gihimo na lang nato og read M1, M2, M3, M4. And then we do the computation. Okay, so for the computation, as what we have seen there, it's your basic averaging. So once we have taken the average, okay, so once you have computed for the average, we then compare if the grades is greater than 60, or in this case is less than 60. So if grade is less than 60, then you are considered to fail. If it is false, that means it is a grade of 50 and above, then you pass. Okay? So, kana guys, very simple ra kayo ang flow charting. Okay? So, again, it is really important okay, to learn how to do flowcharting, because as things gets more complicated, labi na ang mga algorithms becomes complicated, it would be easier for you to understand how to implement that algorithm into a code if you have a flowchart. Okay, so in short, the flowchart helps you organize on how you might be implementing your code. Okay, so again, there's an exercise there. Okay, sige daw. Let's try this one. Okay. Ato asang i-clean up ha, ang ato ang Jamboard. Nalingaw na in town si kinsa man si suwat. Okay. So let's try to answer this exercise. Okay. Who would like to make the pseudocode? Okay. So start lang dire with the pseudocode. Okay, compute the year-end bonus of an employee considering the following condition. If the employee's monthly salary is less than 2,000 pesos, nakuwangan na ginig zero. Okay. So if it is less than 2,000 pesos, if it is less than 2,000 pesos, the bonus is 50%. If the salary, otherwise, it will be fixed amount of 1,500. Okay? So that means, again, 50% ang bonus kung less than 2,000 ang imong salary monthly. But if it is 2,000 and above, it will be a fixed amount of 1,500. So print the name and the corresponding bonus of each employee. Okay. So read the employee name. Okay. So since naaman diri gibutang the name and the corresponding bonus of each employee, so you also read the name. Very good. Sige na. Samtang nay naghimo sa flowchart, naapoy maghimo sa pseudocode para nay guide ang mohimo sa flowchart. Okay. So the name of the employee. Okay, so probably you can just put their salary na lang. Kay kabaw naman ta employee name. Okay.
Can we see the bathroom?
Okay. So based on the salary, do you need also to put there, guys, kung fixed ba or 50%? Dili na no. It will be done by the system based on the employee's salary. Okay. So ibutang na lang po. After reading the name, you also read the salary. So if the salary is less than 2,000, then then unsay buhaton? So butang ipod ni siya og then. Okay, so pwede na ninyo usbon ang text, guys. Okay. Para makita pud sa uban.
Sophia, why are you drinking soft drinks?
Okay.
That's not a dinosaur.
So gipaspasan himo. So read employee name and salary. Compute for the bonus. Okay. So take note, kanang compute for the bonus, I think that will be under na siya sa selection statement. Okay? So you don't need to put the compute bonus na because kanang sa imuhang condition, is basically a way for you to compute for the bonus. Okay? So if the employee's salary is less than 2,000, then you get 50% of this salary. And ang ihang gigamit na formula to get the 50% is by simply dividing salary by 2. Okay? Otherwise, else, if the salary is 2,000 and above, then he will have a bonus of a fixed value of 1,500. Okay, very good. There you have it, guys. That is our pseudocode. Then how about your flowchart? Okay. Asa man ang kondisyon sa tuang flowchart?
Add me to your birthday party. No? Yes? Yes, I know what they are. I know what they're eating. I know what they are eating. It's guys. Are you eating chips, Lucas? Are you eating chips? Then don't eat Luca because it looks like chips. Then buy potato crisps. And get me add me. I have color pencil. Do you see my name? Yes. I see your name is Chester. What? I think your name is Jessica. Jessica? On my screen I see. Excuse me. On my screen, it just excuse me on my screen it just shows Lucas Captain. No, on my screen I saw Precious? How about Christian Niño Tibilia? That's my full name. Excuse me, and I see Teacher Jan. My name, her name, it is Jayan Dandan. It is Jayan Dandan. Dandan is a pet. It is Jayan Dandan. I saw that on my screen. It's Jayan Dandan. My screen is on Jayan Dandan. And look at
Okay.
I draw and then I colored it. Look at.
Okay, so I think okay na ni siya. Sayon ra guys, ang flowcharting, sayon ra kaayo. Okay? So let's move to the next example. Probably you can do it on your free time, guys. Try to answer that exercise during your free time. Let's proceed to the iteration or the so-called repetition or loops na structure. Okay? So again, as indicated there, the structure provides for repetitive execution of operation or routine while the condition is true. Okay? Now, there are possibly two ways of creating a repetition na statement. Okay? It could be naunahon nimo ang condition, then the things that you need to do, which is the statement. Okay? So as you can see guys, very important na naatay direction sa ato ang arrow. Okay? Para makita nato while the statement is again true, nagyapoy label, you know where to go and what to do next. There's also this case wherein naatay loops or iteration you perform wherein we do the statement first before we actually check the given condition. Okay? So if the condition is true, then you perform that same statement again until the statement becomes false. Okay? So let me show you a picture. Asan na ito? So, oops. Di man ma. Okay. Let me show you this picture, guys. Okay, can you see the screen being shared?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, if you are Coyote, okay? So, ang imong statement i-perform is running. Okay? And you also have to do some decision making like check if it is the edge. Okay? So, if you are Coyote here, okay, unsa may imuhang flowchart ka nga need i-perform while you are running. Okay? Which one would be better to use? Okay? When the structure is being implemented. Okay? So, base diri sa tuang duha ka loop structure. Okay? Which one would be more beneficial to Mr. Coyote if implementing an algorithm, okay, when he is trying to catch the roadrunner? Kaning nga condition or kaning naspikas? Okay. So, kung magbasit ana ron, unsay gigamit niya? Kanang naa sa left or naa sa right?
Sa left.
Okay, so ang
Sa right.
ang gigamit niya nasa right no kay ngano man dagan siya daan before siya nag-check. Okay? So these are just mga scenarios po guys wherein you can make use of these differing loop structures. Okay? So in this statement, mga kayo si Coyote kay ngano man ang iyang gi-perform is dagan sa before checking. Okay? Si Roadrunner is checking first, okay, asa siya mudagan before it actually runs. So mo nang wa siya matagak sa cliff. Okay? So again, there will be situations in programming or mga problems related to programming that would involve you identifying if kailangan ba nga i-perform sa ang statement daan before I do the checking and loop again, or do I need to check first before performing the statement. Okay? So, mo na siya guys. Now, let's look at an example again, okay, of how loop structures are utilized in flowchart. Okay? So again, these are the typical statements that you will be using when loops are performed. Okay? So naatay while do statement, okay, wherein the keyword while is being utilized, then you put the condition. If it is true, then do some statements. Then end while. Okay? Now, naapoy kaning statement, repeat until statement that you do some statement first, then you check the condition if it is true. If the condition still is true, then you repeat the statement again. Okay? So, kaning repeat until mao ni siya ang ato ang implementation for this one, na statement then condition. Whereas ang while do statement is the implementation nato for condition first, then the statement. Okay? Now, there are special cases wherein the action to be done is already predefined kung kapila siya balik-balikon. So, for example, katong pag perform og checking sa papel nga kabautag 50 times natong buhaton. Okay? So, you can actually use this one, guys. Okay? So, for counter is equal to 1. Okay? Then do some statements. Okay? So, kanang counter basically is a variable that you might use to monitor how many times, okay, nimo i-perform ang certain operation. Okay? While kaning repeat until, while do, these are loop structures that you use if you are unsure of as to how many times you will perform the operation. Ug mag-agad lang sa condition kung kanus siya mo stop. Okay? So, mana siya guys, ang tulo ka loop structures nga pwede na to gamiton with iteration. Okay? Now, let us look at this example. Okay? So, again, we are to find the average secured by 40 students. Okay? So, we have here, okay, nagamit ta og while na statement. Okay? So, gi-check na to ang counter kung makaabot na ba siya og 40. Okay? So, kung wa pa siya kaabot og 40, so what we do is we read the mark. Okay? And then, we solve for the total. Okay? So, at the same time, we also keep track of how many counts are already done or kapila na ta nagsigig basa ni Mark. Okay? So, instead of us putting there read mark 1, read mark 2, read mark 3, read mark 4, read mark 5 until maabot ka read mark 40, okay? We actually made use of loops, guys. Okay? So, loops can be very helpful especially on scenarios like this nga dinaghanay. Nya repetitive ang task. Okay? So imagine kung ang gigamit lang nato diri is katong sequential na structure. Nya ang i-count nimo is mabot nag 400. Di ba dili practical mo gamit ka atong sequential. Okay? So that's why we use loops. Okay? So this part of the loop here would ensure that you will be reading 40 kabuok grado. Okay? And those grades are added to your variable total. So makakita mo diri guys sa ibabaw, nag-initialize punta sa value ni total such that it will start at a value of 0. The same is also true for counter. Okay? So every time nga makabasa ta og grado, sige tag add ana kang total. At the same time, sige tag increment sa value ni counter. So the moment nga makaabot na ka og 40 ka bookmarks ang nabasa, you can then now compute for the average by simply dividing the total score or the total mark divided by your counter value. Okay? So the counter value at this point expected maabot na siya 40. Manong 40 man? Because when counter is equal to 40, as you can see here guys, it is not anymore less than 40. So it gets out of the loop. Okay? So as it gets out of the loop, you compute for the average using that formula, then you print the average and then you stop. Okay? So again, an example of iteration or loop structure that simplifies the method of taking multiple inputs. Okay? Question so far, guys? Hello, hello.
Wala ra, sir.
Wala ra. So, panra, self-explanatory ra kayo, no?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So, here is another example. Okay. In this example, as you can see, guys, giuna na to perform ang repetitive function before ta nag-actually check, okay, sa to ang condition. Okay, isa to, naay nagkuan. Pwede ra increment anang na I plus 1, sir? Yes, pwede ra na gamiton ng increment. Okay, because counter plus 1 is just simply equal to increment counter. Okay, so ako lang gipaklaro diri ang formula gigamit. Okay, so again, in this example, find the average mark secured by 40 students. Okay, so ang gigamit po nato diri is monitor tadaan, nag-read ka sa input, again, doing the computation, and then checking if the counter has now reached to 40. Okay? So if the counter is now greater than or equal to 40, as you can see, kung matro na gani na nga condition, pwede nato siya ipagawas. Okay? So actually guys, pwede man sa nato usbon ang condition diri. Okay? You can actually change this such that you repeat whatever you are doing if the condition is true. So let's say, if I modify this, okay, if this becomes true and this becomes false, unsay akong ipuli diri nga condition sa tunga. Okay? So, unsay ako ikapuli diri nga condition para it will repeat this, okay, while the condition is true.
Counter is less than equal 40.
Okay, while counter is less than or equal to
40, sir.
40. Okay? So, take note, nag-start ta diri at 0. Okay? Iksud na to diri sa ato ang count. Okay? So, unsa to'y mahitabo? The moment you add mark to total, your counter increases by 1.
1.
Okay. So, if maabot na ta og 40, so that means we have already garnered 40 ka bookmarks and add it to the total, okay? Unsa may mahitabo if less than or equal to 40. I-check ni mo diri 40 man siya, mobalik na pud siya diri. Mga yun nasag another input for mark. Kay di ba awa guys? If your counter is less than or equal to 40, so let's say counter here now is 40. I-evaluate ana niya diri. Since 40 man siya, nasud pa siya aning equal to 40. So, mubalik na po siya diri. So, there will now be 41. And we are only to secure 40 students na score. Okay?
Counter less than 40 na sir.
Oh, counter less than 40 ran siya. Okay? So, kana guys, take note lang jud mo when to use less than and when to use less than or equal to. Okay? So you can do a simple simulation like, sige, para dili kay taas ug magsige kag monitor. Instead of 40, use 4. Okay? Para dali ra nimo matrace kung kapila na jud niya gi-perform ang loop. Okay? So, mao na siya guys. So, morning dire, as you can see, is the counter greater than. Diba? Counter is greater than or equal to 40. Okay? Kay the moment na maabot na ang counter to 40, mo-stop na siya. And do the computation na. Okay? So, bantayan lang dyan ninyo pag-ayo. Okay? Kay essentially, di ba, if the counter value is greater, is not equal to greater than or equal to 40, then therefore it is less than 40 ang iyang value. Okay? So, mo na siya guys. Nakadiscuss na ba mo Venn diagram?
O, sir.
So, let's say, simple exercise lang para ma-practice ang inyong relational operator and logical operator. Okay, so let's say I have here a list of numbers. Numbers from 0 to 100. Okay, so let's say, unsa nga condition ang mo satisfy if I get a value of 50 to 60.
I'm sharing na my thermostat.
Okay. Sige daw. Create a condition that would be true if n is a value equal to 50 up to 60. Okay? So, unsay condition na ko ana guys gamiton to check the value of n. Sige. So, dapat input na ko sa n, okay? Ato ang ma-identify nga 50 to 60, it becomes true. Otherwise, if it's a value that is less than 50 or greater than 60, it becomes false. Sige. Unsay condition na to ana guys. Pwede ra ninyo ibutang diri sa chat box. Counter is greater than 50. So let's say unsa ni? C lang daw. CTR is greater than 50. Okay? Nya less than 60. Unsa man i-compare nimo sa 60? Okay? Kanin. Apa kang mahusay? Kang mahusay is that n is less than or equal to 50 and unsa to siya? And unsa man na n kaya po no, n is greater than or equal to 60. Okay? Murag nabali no kay kung tan-aw nimo ba n less than 50, asa mang n less than 50 diri dapita o greater than or equal to 60 na diri dapita. So we are getting these values here. Dili ang 50 to 60. Okay, so kang canonical unsa man na siya? CTR is greater than 50 and CTR is less than 50. Okay. So, kani kang canonical, okay, greater than 50 and less than 60. Okay. So, greater than 50. Tura, niya gi-and niya with less than 60. Kana. So, anything between ani niya, since it is using and operation, okay, intersection. Okay? But the thing is, wa gi-appeal si 50 og si 60. Okay. Now, take note guys that when you are using the operators, okay, take note, when you are using the operators are, ano to? Binary operators. Okay? So, when you say 50 less than counter, less than 60, okay? Who comes first?
I got 6 stars.
Okay? So, the computer would have a hard time understanding this one. Okay? Dapat imuha jud nang i-identify guys, okay? Asa ang first operand nimo, asa ang second operand. Okay? So just like again kaning gi suwat dire ni isa ni kanonigo. Okay? Unsa na siya gibuhat? CTR is equal to or greater than 50 and CTR is equal to or less than 60. So makita nato diri guys, oh. Using this operator na kay duha ka operand, di ba? Using this operator, you have this operand. Using this operator, you have this operand. Okay? So there are two operands always for every operator na gigamit. Okay? So let's start thinking that way na. Okay? Kay para duol-duol na lang niya siya puhon guys sa ato ang implementation. Okay. So how about this one? Let's try to answer this one. One last example. Okay, before you do your exercise. Yeah. Kadaghan naman gud taon ani. Dati bayo niya. So kung sa Bisaya pa X na niya no. Dati bayo. Okay, so ato asang i-clear ha. Clear frame. O nanaghan sila nag-join. Okay, clear sa nato. To give way for this exercise or this example. Okay? Sige daw, who would like to make the pseudocode? Again, sa pseudocode guys, use the text tool na lang para dili lisod og tawag na dili lisod og drawing. Okay? O daghan pa kayo nagsige og practice pa og suwat-suwat. Nalingaw sila sa unsa ni siya nga pen. Marker ba to? Highlighter. Marker dito. Pwede ay. So dito highlighter. Di sa brush. Di sa dara di ay. Laser di ay. Okay. Nalingaw sila gamit sa eraser. Okay. So let's see at the pseudocode. Okay. So initialize, counter, and number. So the problem states that using loop, display, or make a flowchart that will ask for the user for a number greater than 10. It will not stop asking the user for an input unless the number entered is greater than 10. It will then and prints the number and the number of times the user entered a number. Okay. Dubli lagi ni. Sorry. Kadit lang. Let me okay. So then print anong namay and? So then print the number of times okay, kana lang. So there we have it. unsay kulang nato diri sa pseudocode. Okay? So, wala tay read. Okay? So, na-print but wala tay read. Read what? Read the input. Where will we put that part? Okay? Nga mag-read sa input. Okay? Ato amang gi compare sa input. So, there must be a way for us to get that value. Okay? So, asa man ang needed mag-repeat. Oh, okay. So, looking at the pseudocode, nag-initialize ta og value for number and counter. Then, ang ato ang repeat. Okay? So, asam ni siya nga structure ang ato ang gigamit, guys. Okay. So, take note, okay, of the structure that you will be using, okay, for repetition. Okay. So, let's try to stay with this one. Okay? Since there is no way for us to know how many times nato i-perform ang repetition, then you could either use repeat until or while. Okay? Sige daw. Katong naghimo sa flowchart, kindly modify. Okay, naano day? Repeat. So, print input a number greater than 10. Then you do the input. If the input now is greater than 10, then sakto ba ang condition? Until, until, unitil. Okay. So take note sa repeat until the condition that is again based on the true statement. Okay, mo repeat ta sa operation kung unsa ganito? Kung dili pa greater than 10 ang answer or ang gi-input na value. Okay, so try to check the condition kaning sa pseudocode. So until the condition becomes true, which is input is greater than 10, it now goes out of the loop. Otherwise, okay. So kung magtan-aw ta guys, which do you think is murag mas dali basahon? Ang pseudocode or ang flowchart?
Pseudocode, sir.
Okay. Mas dali basahon ang pseudocode. So, hapit na mahuman ang ato ang flowchart. So, again, sa flowchart, kindly indicate asa ang ato ang arrowhead ani, padong. Okay, there you go. So, counter initialize to 0. The moment you read the number, you increment the counter by 1. And we check if the number indeed is greater than 10. So if it's not greater than 10, so therefore, the condition is false. It then redo the reading of the number and the incrementing of the counter and checking of the number again until such time if the statement becomes true, it then prints the number of times we have counted or we have entered the number. Okay, perfect. Okay, So again, in your notes, there's another set of practice exercise that you can do. Okay? So try niya po ninyo guys. Okay? Make a flow chart for a system that will maintain a room temperature from 20 to 23 degrees Celsius. Okay? So assuming ang input magikan sa sensor. Okay? So if the sensor detects the temperature, okay, to be less than 23, so it will control a heater. It will turn on a heater. Okay? So, turn on ang heater up to 20 to 23 degrees Celsius. Now, once mulapas na po og 23 degrees Celsius, you turn off the heater. Okay? So, expected naman na siya. Ang temperature nimo would drop. Okay? Pang US man gud ni siya nga kwan guys, pang US nga setting ba, nga tingtugnaw. Okay? So napapanahon ra ron. Okay? So kung tugnaw kay nag-snowman, muubos jud ang temperature. So we use the heater there to maintain the temperature within 20 to 23 degrees Celsius. Okay? So i-try niya ninyo. This is an example of a flow chart wherein walay stop. Okay? So this will just keep on running, okay, maintaining the temperature of 23 or 20 to 23 degrees Celsius. Okay. So again, here is an example of a flow chart nga walay stop. Okay, nganong wa may stop kay magsige man ni siya og loop guys. Okay, trying to maintain the temperature of 20 to 23 degrees Celsius. Okay. So, I think that's it for our topic on flowchart. Okay. So, flowchart, as stated here, is better for communication. Kaya nga naman, at a glance man good, makita man good dayon nimo how your program flow from one part of your algorithm to the other. Okay. And it is very very efficient if you follow it for coding. Okay? And it is also usable for debugging and testing. Okay, makita man gud dayon nimo if you look at the flowchart kung kanimo ang input asa siya padong, mobalik ba siya or mo exit ba. Okay? So disadvantage lang po sa flowchart is module na siya guys. Time consuming to create. Just like what you did, di ba? Mas nauna jud permi mahuman ang pseudocode as compared sa flowchart. Okay? So difficult to incorporate changes. Kay nga naman, when you use your paint to draw flowchart, if you want to move a certain block, like for example, a decision or a read or a process, okay, ma-erase nimo ang uban nimong ma-erase nimo ang uban nimong gipangsulat. Okay? So here, no standards are available again for determining the amount of detail to be produced. But again, as stated sa atong guidelines sa flowchart, we need to minimize the level of detail para consistent siya in every aspect. Okay? So, before we proceed with these so-called common programming errors, I think you need first to practice more on pseudocodes and flowcharting. Okay, so I have prepared here, guys, sa tuang classroom. Okay, so there is an activity there for creating pseudocodes and flowchart. Okay, ma-check ba ninyo?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Na-publish na ba niya? Oh, wala pa ma-publish, guys. Okay.
Wala pa dito, sir.
Wala pa day, wala pa. So paki-check lang under dira sa topic na Introduction to Computers and Logic.
Nana, sir.
So there is a Google form there, okay, provided for you to attach your answer. Okay, so in the Google form, again, you need to log in using your CTU account. So there is that problem of